Right, so this is my main application with all of my tests in it. And the main problem I'm having is to do with the function pointers I need to do the mouse and keyboard callbacks, so I can actually control my camera and control the camera by moving and rotating it. Some two good tests. So the current one, Spotlight, has it. And the other one is Cube. Test. Cube. Here we go. So this is what I'm talking about here. In my callbacks, so I keep them at the bottom. What is all this? Oh my god, it's only been a few weeks. I'm already not sure what half the code does. As in, why is it commented out? I'll have to read through it again. Here we go. So, on input, delta time is one of them. It's called mDelta time in this file, but it's not a member variable. If it was a member variable, it would say like unrecognized, undefined. As an example, CamX. This is CamX, for example. Just throw in CamX into this. Here we go. Ugh. These ain't coming. Huh? It's undefined. It's coming up as undefined. If I try and type anything into a function that's not a member, it's undefined. So I have to create these variables outside in the field, in the namespace. But of course I need these variables in my other tests so I can move the camera there. So, take Spotlight for example, the latest one. What I've done, I've just renamed them, so it's the same variables doing exactly the same thing, but I'll recreate them every time. So I just call them Spotlight, show mouse. And again, Spotlight, mouse callback, because again I've got to use the same functions, but if I just call it mouse callback, I get linker errors, because of course I've got a mouse callback function in test cube, and I have tried in the past making mouse callback, scroll callback, whatever, members, but if you do that, it doesn't allow you to pass it into the function pointer. Where's my input? You can't put member functions into the callbacks. For some reason they've got to be these functions made inside the namespace. I did look up and understand how function pointers work, so function pointer is not the problem. I think the problem's got something to do with the namespace. Ideally, what I would do is I just have these variables here, and in test cube and test spotlight I can just call these instead of having to create new ones every time. But it seems like I have to create new ones every time if I want to call them properly in the as function pointers in the GLFW callback functions. Here, I've only got the mouse one here because I don't need the. I've got rid of that zoom function. Like, I'm able to zoom. Who cares? Like, but I can also just show. I'll show you the test anyway. Let's see. Screen's black. Good, good, good. Is it working? It should be working. You should be able to see my tests now. So here's a glorious list of all of my tests. The first two tests are from the original OpenGL tutorial I followed by the cherno. The cherno is on YouTube. He basically, because of the cherno, I learned C++ and OpenGL, the basics of it. The cherno tutorials ended at the foundations of OpenGL. You got taught VAOs, VBOs, MVP, basics of shaders, and he came up with these first two tests. Also included IMGUI for it. So all this does, it allows you to mess around with the color of the background. This is test number 1. Simple as hell. Test number 2, it showed rendering objects. In this case, it's just the same object rendered twice, but they're able to be manipulated differently. And obviously don't touch the Z because we're using a current orthographic camera. This is still when it was in orthographics, it's all 2D. But this next test introduced the idea of rendering multiple triangles into a quad and attaching an image to them through textures, and they'll use STB image or something like that it was called. And yeah, how to expose variables in the shaders so that you can manipulate them in the actual program. And then box, this is when I first moved on to I think it's literally just called Learn OpenGL or something like that. And this has to be one of my favorite tests because it solidified my understanding of the basics of OpenGL. And it actually allowed me to do a little bit more than the chernos. But the fact that the cherno gave me this really, really good, like the fact that I've got these tests I can click on and stuff like that, that was all the cherno's code. And I was literally just built off all the cherno's code. And this test allows me to, well, it introduced me again to most of the stuff that cherno did, but it solidified it for me because it explained it in a slightly different way. And I was able to manipulate the code I already had to get it working this way, showing that I understood the current architecture I was working in and sort of rewrote because this tutorial I'm following, the Learn OpenGL, from this point on, it writes everything in one main function. So I've had to manipulate the architecture of my code to get it working. I couldn't have just copied and pasted. It wouldn't have worked. Because I believe I used GLFW and he used glue, so we used slightly two different wranglers for our OpenGL implementation. So it is slightly different code. But yeah, this test properly solidified my understanding of how OpenGL works through its VBOs, VAOs, linking a shader, attaching a shader, bind this, bind that. And also help Lee understand how to expose the variables again, because I've exposed its translation, its rotation, and its scale. So that's negative, there's obviously positive, double it in size. And also there's a mix value. This is like it mixes two textures together. So it's like I can go from one image to another image, or halfway, or 20% into one. And I added this for just fun, little animate button. So yeah, this box test, probably one of my favorites for my understanding of OpenGL. And now cube test, that moves on to 3D. So I'm no longer using orthographic perspective. I'm now using orthographic camera. I'm now using a perspective camera. Oh, let me just. It's a bit shoddy, but there you go. And this is where I was struggling with last time with understanding how to get my input working. So I got it all working. It all works fine. Look up and down, zoom in and out. But it's these. I can continue recreating all these variables and calling them back in again. But ideally, I'd have some sort of place where they are. I just call them once instead of recreating them over again. But there you go. This introduced me to 3D perspective. And let's see what else. Well, manipulating more variables through the vertex array objects. Input, perspective. It didn't introduce me to too much more because there's not too much difference between rendering a quad and rendering a cube. There's not too much difference in this one. But I just like the novelty of I'm now using 3D. Let's see. Color test was just introduction to mixing colors. So obviously I've got my box, make it whatever color, and the light, depending on the light color, it affects the color of the box. And I kept my cube there, the white one, white, because just for remove all ambiguity, you're meant to be looking at the box and nothing, just see that the color changes. This was the whole point of this, because it's far more simple than the previous test I've just shown you. The whole point of this one was to show the very, very beginnings of how you blend color and blend, well, light, basically. It's going to move on to light, obviously, basic lighting. So this is obviously the very, very basics of lighting. This time I didn't implement the ability to press spacebar. I've been too lazy to implement it, so I actually got to physically close the application to reload the test. But yeah, this just shows a cube lit up and has a light source orbiting it. Very basic point light sort of lighting. Also, there is an actual point light test, which adds, can't remember the word, attenuation or something like that. Yeah, I don't remember the word exactly. But I'll move on to it. So I'll show you the point light first, just because it's the sort of the next one on the list, wasn't it? See, now the point light actually like fades off, and you can manipulate its X, Y, Z values. Send it to the back, send it to the front, left and right, and directional light. Obviously, you can just manipulate its rotational value. Rotate on the X, rotate on the Y, and then also rotate on the Z axis. So now a light source facing us, facing away. And finally, the spotlight, which sort of creates like it almost sort of creates a pseudo horror look. And again, I haven't implemented the ability to press spacebar to get my mouse back, so I'll have to close the application when I'm done messing around with this. Yeah, so far that's what I've done. The next one I'll be doing is implementing loads of lights into one scene and building like a properly lit scene. But there you go. For now, that's it. Program. There we go. Here's my main application. Those are my tests. That's it.